So once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Martin Mwezerwa from RDB, and I'll be your MC for this, this afternoon session. I'd like to hand you over directly to our moderator, Mr. Steve Mutabazi, who's a commercial strategist in RDB, the ICT department. He's also the acting head of ICT in RDB. Steve.
Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. Protocol observed. Let's just start this session by me asking our panel here to introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself first. Steve Mutabazi. I currently head the ICT department in RDB, but really 110% of my work is bringing investment in the country. So that said, you probably heard in the earlier session this morning about how, as a sector, ICT investment has done very well over the last little while. So that's why there's a fair amount of work, but it's absolutely important, as you can see. That's why we're here. So what we're talking about today is something really, really significant to use of ICT in achieving economic growth, especially in Africa, where the growth rate is the highest at the moment. But there are certain aspects to it. We need to leverage the internet to be able to achieve economic growth, but we have to do it inclusively. Now, the panelists here will cover that aspect of it in different ways, but it's absolutely important that we understand what it means to leverage the internet in a way that is inclusive, that actually delivers maximum benefit to different communities of the world, especially the developing world. Inclusiveness is linked to governance of the internet. Now, the panel here, in one way or the other, will talk about governance of the internet resource that we have, that we think and believe will enable us to achieve economic growth. So, before we get into the discussion, what will happen roughly is that if things had gone the right way, we would have the president of an organization called ICANN. That's I-C-A-N-N. It's not a sentence, it's just an acronym. But ICANN plays an important role in the governance of the internet. We need to understand that as an economy ourselves, or economies in the developing part of Africa. That will be covered in a lot of detail, and we need to understand that, and we need to have that as a takeaway. So, in order to hear what the president of ICANN would have said if he had been here, there is a video. So that panelists can see that video, once we've done the introductions, we'll move down there, watch the video. There will be slide presentations as well. And once that's finished, we'll come back up here and go into the panel discussion. So thanks for your patience there. So may I ask our panelists to please introduce themselves. Pierre Dangenou from ICANN, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Pierre Dangenou. I'm Vice President for Africa and work with ICANN, and happy to share with you some of my ideas. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Vincent Woiswa Bajire. I'm a member of Parliament in Uganda, and I chair the Committee on Information and Communication Technology. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Patrick Nyirishema, my name's. I'm the Director General for RURA, which is Rwanda Utilities Regulatory Authority. So we regulate the ICT sector, among other utilities. Very excited about this afternoon session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Gilang Hiramugawa. I am the CEO of RICTA, Rwanda ICT Association. We are the voice of the internet community in Rwanda. We manage the .rwcctld and the Rwanda Internet Exchange Point. Thank you.
My name is Mike Silva. I'm a member of the board of directors of ICANN, and currently the only ICANN board member actually living in Africa. Given that all bar the president, all the other directors of the ICANN board are non-executive, my day job is head of legal and commercial for Liquid Telecom, and since 2004 I've been a member of the board of directors of .za, the .za domain name authority which runs the .za CCTLD in South Africa.
Thank you very much, distinguished panel. May I request you to come and take your seats at the front here so we can begin our video and presentations. A round of applause for the distinguished panel, please. It's not every day that you get minds such as these discussing a very important topic such as internet governance. So I think you can count yourself among the privileged few. So while they take their seats, I'll request the AV guys to begin with the video from ICANN. Please go ahead.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am Fadi Shehadeh, the President and CEO of ICANN. Thank you very much for allowing me to address you today via video. I am very sorry, I'm particularly sorry to my friend, the Minister Jean Philbert, for not being able to be with you. I want to thank him and thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to address you remotely due to scheduling difficulties. And it is especially sad for me not to be with you because, like you, I'm an African. My parents come from Africa. They've lived in Africa for many years. And we have great memories of this very special continent. I hope that I will be with you soon, as I will meet you in many of the global fora as well. Today, we're here to discuss internet governance. This is a subject that has occupied a very important place today in the global agenda. And why? The internet has become central to the growth of many of our societies and economies. It is a force for good, a force for development, a force for advancement. The recent report by the Boston Consulting Group shows that the internet can contribute greatly to the economies of developing regions. And we in Africa, our youth, our people, need this development and this growth sorely at this time so that we can advance and take this growth that we see today in many sub-Saharan countries and advance it to the next level. The internet is key for this, and we should not miss the opportunity to fuel that growth through the internet. Having said this, the internet is challenging our governance models. The internet is transnational. It crosses borders. Its management and governance are requiring all of us to rethink how to apply rules and laws on a resource that goes beyond the jurisdictional borders of our governance models. It is also fast. Therefore, it challenges the existing international systems that cannot and are not designed to move at the speed of the internet. Therefore, it is important for Africa right now to come together and take its seat, its due seat at the table to manage the internet and govern it in a way that is good for all, including all of us in Africa. The opportunity is right there. You have the Net Mundial initiative that was just announced in Geneva. This is an initiative to bring the world together around the outcomes of the Net Mundial meeting in Sao Paulo and the subsequent panel that was run by President Ilves of Estonia. This is an important initiative, and Africa needs to be at the table, shaping that agenda so that the outcomes are good for Africa as well as the world. There is also the ICANN process in my own organization. The process to make ICANN truly global and truly at the service of everyone. I have started operationally by moving many of our headquarter functions around the world. In Istanbul, we have a growing hub at the intersection of Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, serving you and serving our people in Africa. But also, we have started the very historic process of ending the unique role of the US government in the stewardship of the IANA functions. And that is very important so that I can step into a place where all of us, governments, civil society, business, technical organizations, are sitting at the table together, managing this great resource that will help change our lives and our people. I urge you to take this historic moment seriously. Get involved. I am here committed to you. My organization is committed to you. Anything we can do to make it easier for you and for your teams and your constituents to participate in this internet governance debate, you can count on me. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to meet all of you around the world. Thank you.
I know it's normally difficult to clap for someone who is not here, but I'm sure he has heard the vibrations from wherever he is. So, Mr. Pierre, I would like to come and make your presentation. Thank you.
You can put the presentation on, please. Well, good afternoon again, and you just heard from my CEO and president the importance, of getting involved in internet governance. What I'm trying to do here is maybe in a very few minutes, introduce briefly not only ICANN's role, but the NTIA stewardship, transition. It's an important issue. We started last March with the declaration from the US government. So it's important also that we be part of this. Like the CEO just said, ICANN is that what we might call multi-stakeholder organization that coordinates, those critical resources of the internet. I mean, the domain names or be there the IP addresses that are so fundamental. But of course, a few of the protocols. So that's quite important. Of course, ICANN is best known for its role as a coordinator of the internet resources. That's a few keywords. Now, it started in 1998 and have been working as a truly multi-stakeholder model. What you have up there is as ICANN, is the way ICANN operates. Of course, we do have a board of directors, but what is important here are the many constituencies that we do have, because ICANN is about bottom-up approach, meaning policy development definitely is one part of coordinating those critical resources. How do you do this? The way you do this is have all the constituency discuss issues and come up with some concrete solutions, and that's really reflecting to policies that are taken. So it's important that, well, you understand how ICANN is actually formatted. Of course, you do have government that are represented in what we call the GAC, the Governmental Advisory Committee, that's the far extreme over there. Of course, you do have technical part of it, have the business part of it, and you also have what we call the at-large, meaning the user at large. So definitely everyone has a say. Of course, let me just stop by what we call the GNSO as there. We have to also understand that it's about business. A domain name is about business. Don't forget about it mostly. And of course, even more than 90% of ICANN's revenue is coming from this GNSO. But at large has also got very important role to play, because that's where exactly we also listen to the ordinary user, his views on different aspects of it. Of course, the protocol, the IP addresses. This is about ICANN, and we do have a few flyers there if you want to know more about it, or you go to the website, ICANN.org. Now, briefly, the second part of this is what I chose to highlight, because we do have so many issues today pertaining to internet governance. We do have IGF, here and there. We'll be hearing about this later on. But let me just dwell on this U.S. government, announcement, because that was made on 14th of March. And what is said definitely was that the U.S. government announced its intent to transition the stewardship of the IANA functions, to the global stakeholder community. I think that's a very great declaration, because what it means is that, well, oversight on the IANA function, meaning coordination of the domain names, IP address, all of those things, is going to fall upon, stakeholder community. Meaning that right now I can operate, within sort of contract with the U.S. Department of Commerce. And within that contract, we do have, these functions, which is the whole issue of coordinating the critical resources. Now, there are a few conditions attached to what the U.S. government is expecting. They wanted ICANN to organize a kind of discussion, global discussion, that is going to tell the best way we really want to move forward, and to produce, certainly, a document to be considered by the U.S. government. But of course, this declaration should not come as a surprise to some of us that have been following these things, because even in 1998, the U.S. government has already started, its sort of transition of the oversight on internet at some point. So here is what definitely the U.S. government is saying. We have 4 points of it. Whatever document developed should abide by a few principles. One, it should support and enhance the multi-stakeholder model. Number two, it should maintain the security, resiliency, of the internet. And number three, well, it should also meet the needs and expectation of the global, customers and partners of the IANA services. IANA, I'll come on that later on. And then we need to maintain the openness of the internet. Actually, these are the most important things. But the U.S. government also is saying that it's not ready to transition this stewardship to any government or a group of governments. And that's sometimes where people really are putting questions about that. Now, maybe we just need to understand the IANA function before we move forward. Globally, IANA actually is doing what one person used to do for internet. And I'm certain that some of you guys know that one person, John Postel, he passed away. Here is the guy who was actually maintaining the whole DNS system, just writing down everything. So it has changed today to a very big sort of business. So maintenance of the protocol, the parameters that we need for internet to work, you know about IETF. Allocating the internet numbers, you know about Afrinic, for instance, for Africa. That's the African, registry. That's an internet registry where you get your IP addresses. This is managed actually by IANA. The ARPA and the international domains also maintained by IANA. And the whole administrative responsibility of the DNS and the coordinating also of the route management system, because it's key to the internet, the route management system. Well, these are definitely what it's all about. And transitioning, the stewardship to global level. So this really highlights what it all means. So quickly, and then maybe in 1 or 2 minutes, what has been achieved so far since the 14th of March. I can put up a few, steps definitely which are about, how we do launch this multi-stakeholder process, and the end of it will certainly be the provision of that document that's being expected by the U.S. government. Community responses were received, after this declaration. So many emails, came, contribution from everywhere. Submissions were made in different languages to actually boil down to the putting up of a few things which I would like to skip all of this because it gives you some momentum and also gives you in details what having that. Yeah, let me dwell on that one. Please go back a little bit, please, to that table. So that table you have there is about the composition of the what we call the IANA Stewardship Transition Coordination Group. So we end up with a group that's going to actually help work on this on the issue and come up by certainly September 2015 with that document that we all agree on. The good thing here is that have large representation, from different constituencies. And you notice that the GAC, the Government Advisory Committee, for instance, they have 5 representatives on that group, whereas all the others are having 2, meaning it's quite important, that the government be part of this. Maybe I would like to highlight that we do have 3 to 4 Africans that are sitting also on that group, which is quite important. They have been selected. And one of the African representatives has been selected as the vice chair of this group. It's important what this group is going to do in the coming whole year. They are going they already started, convening a few meetings, online, most of them also face-to-face meetings, to really discuss how they are going to organize this work. So the rest is about the timeline for this, and here is the Bureau, the way it's done today. They are going to draw their own chapter, the way they are going to work, and what I just want to highlight here is that here is the time frame. It's the participation. We really need everyone to participate. And if we are talking about this thing today, it's going to be key for the internet governance. And you need to understand the issues there. And Africa needs to participate. Right now, participation is a bit low from Africa. We may talk about this later on. So yeah, this is definitely the main task of the ICG, the coordinating group, but which is also one part of the internet governance, because there are still so many other components, to the internet governance, issues. So I would like to stop with that one, because I just wanted to kind of set the stage for our discussions, and so that we hear more about the other initiatives, but definitely also how, from Africa, we could really participate with that global debates. So thanks for your attention, and I'll be ready for any further comments and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that enlightening presentation. May I at this point request the panel to join us up here. And then we'll have an exciting discussion, governance of the internet and the frameworks thereof. So at this point, I'll hand over to Mr. Steve Mutabazi, our moderator for this session. Steve.
Thank you. Well, I think as we heard from the president, CEO, president, the CEO of ICANN. ICANN is an ecosystem, and it includes all the players whose economic prosperity depends on the internet. The issue for me, as somebody who's been around watching the growth of the internet and participating in the growth of the internet, what I can say about our level of preparedness here in Africa is that we think we're going to rely on the internet to develop, but so far, the governance of that resource that we think we're going to depend on is happening while we watch. I think the general message from the CEO was that that time is finished. We need to get in and play our role and be part of the ecosystem, be part of the governance of this critical resource. So just to get the discussion going, may I ask you Gile, CEO of RICTA, to please just give us a perspective on some of the things you do, your organization does, in the management of this critical resource, at least for Rwanda, and to the extent that you can extend it beyond Rwanda, just give us a perspective from one of the players inside this ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steve. RICTA as a Rwanda ICT Association, and permit me to clarify a bit that we are more promoting the internet community ecosystem within Rwanda. Among other things we are doing, awareness, sensitization. We run the .rwcctld and the Rwanda Internet Exchange Point. It's a resource which is really affecting the whole of Rwanda. So there is no way we can run it as a company or as an organization, but we try as much as possible to bring together all the different stakeholders. Recently we had a Rwanda IGF, Internet Governance Forum, whereby we invite each and every person from the academia, from the public, the private sector, from the government. We sit in one room and we decide, okay, what do we need to do as far as maybe content is concerned? And we all decide together, we need this policy, we need this to be changed. So we see ourselves as an organization that is bringing everybody together to decide on things pertaining to internet, specifically governance. So in a nutshell, this is what I can say. Maybe a comment about ICANN and what is being done. Internet has governance on many levels, maybe ICANN on a global level, but on a national level, we need initiatives like IGFs or any other initiative that is bringing low students or not high-profile people to discuss about things pertaining to internet. This is what I can contribute. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, just before I let you go, I'll ask you a question. What is domain management, and why do we need to do it? What is domain management?
Domain management, a domain, okay, let me define a domain. What is a domain? A domain, it's like a plot, if I can use that analogy. It's a plot whereby you can build either a 2-story, a 5-story building. It's a space on the internet. It's a name you can use to either do business or make known anything that you are doing. So domain management is the way a domain is being managed. It can be taken on a single entity or on a global entity. On a single entity is a domain, one unit of the whole internet ecosystem. And maybe domain name management as a CCTLD is taking care of the names of .rw or .smartrwandadays.rw. This is about domain management. Yes.
So how significant is that to leveraging the internet in Rwanda for economic growth?
It is very important because Rwanda is maybe 26,000 square kilometers, a tiny country, but we can have 1 million domain names. And on the map of internet, those numbers of domain names make us not a small, tiny country, but a very big country. So the domain names are very important, very key. And as time goes on and economy is becoming more internet-based or digitalized, the internet ecosystem becomes so critical that it needs really careful attention and management and governance specifically.
Thank you. I think that question, I'm sure, Mike, you probably want to cover it when you speak as well, but it's an important question, is it not?
Steve, indeed. Indeed. I think the reality is that there's a lot of competition, and part of the creation of ICANN was to use free market forces by separating the economics of domain registration. So you have a registry which runs the database and registrars who sell names. You have the generic names, com, net, org, Africa, Durban, Cape Town, Joburg now, that have launched, and various others, and then you have the country codes, RW, KE, UK, etc. Some of them serve different purposes, but many of those purposes have overlapped over time. So the question is, what is your identity? How do you want to be associated, and how do you want to be associated in your target audience? Are you proudly Rwandan and you want to be very much associated with Rwanda? Then having an RW domain is absolutely essential. If you want to be a citizen of the world, well, then maybe finding the right .com domain is absolutely essential, because then people will perceive you as multinational or more globally focused than just in a single country. Where it's important is that if RW is under control of appropriate local entities, and now it is, the government can start using, the banks can start using, the telcos can start using that domain to institutionalize policy, which can't be done at a global level. For example, additional security restrictions, requirements around registration, moving towards a smart identity program, then using the DNS, because the DNS is a fantastic, really robust database structure, using that as a mechanism to help identify, allocate, share resources, and help citizens communicate. And that's the beauty of having a country code name, is that you can do that, where you can't do that within .com.
Thank you. I think we'll develop that as we go in this conversation. But the key message here from you two is that underlying this critical resource that we have, part of the management of it is being strategic about how you structure it through the domain structure, and the reasons for structuring it can vary from national objectives to economic objectives to social objectives. Okay, so if we can continue the conversation here, please, Patrick, Director General of Rwanda here in Rwanda. I think it's inevitable that if we have a resource like this, like other resources you regulate, that from a national perspective, you'll always be involved in the management of this resource for economic development. So would you have a perspective from a regulator's perspective? Can you give us some thoughts and some ideas and raise questions if you want?
Yeah. Thank you very much, moderator. Let me start by saying that most of what I'm going to share will actually build on the perspectives that have already been shared, starting with the CEO of ICANN. I want to start by saying that Rwanda as a regulator, but also Rwanda as a country, at the last WICIT conference, which of course had a lot of controversy around it, our position was really behind the need for change. We couldn't, the world, the internet has developed and grown, but the governance stayed behind. So the need for governance to catch up with the developments of the internet. Now, so on that basis, we're very happy about the developments that are happening in terms of the transition. Hopefully, at the end of this whole process, there will be something that is workable for everybody. Having said that, as the regulator, I have three things I want to mention in this discussion. The first one is that the current state of affairs has led to what I would like to call asymmetry with regard to the internet economy. So as a regulator, we regulate the telecom companies, and I can see some of the CEOs are sitting in the room. So the telecom companies are regulated, but they're also the ones who do all the investment to build all the pipes to make the internet work. Now, without going into details, the internet economy is a bit tricky. Economics of data are very, very tight on the telcos. The investment required is very big, but the return is quite thin. Then you have, on the other hand, now the real internet, which is the content. And so you have multi-billion-dollar content companies, some of them global and very large. So they make all the billions, but they don't actually have to invest heavily into all the infrastructure that delivers this to the rest of the world. So as a regulator, I look at this debate first and foremost from the perspective of how should the regulatory framework work? And of course, there's a debate on whether the internet should be regulated or not. My view is that it should be regulated. We're not talking about censorship. We're talking about regulation. There has to be a framework within which there is order, within which the benefits and the returns, are shared. What I'm talking about today might not be very evident, but if you look forward into the next 5 years, 10 years, we're talking about now there's a discussion about the Internet of all things, where every single device, every single thing is connected to the Internet. That puts very heavy strain on the telecom operators. So unless there is a way of regulating the content side, where you can be able to create a framework, let me just think aloud here, and this might not sound very nice, but I want to ask a question. For example, today, and by the way, I love Google. They have helped all of us. We access information over the world. But just let me use that as an example, and I have nothing against Google. But why wouldn't an operator, for example, in a proper regulated environment, have a way of sharing revenue with the content providers such as Google? Good question. They might be a $1 company, but why wouldn't that be the case? Why shouldn't an operator, for example, have an option to enable certain search engines where they have an arrangement with them to be able to share revenue, in a workable economic arrangement? So I'm using that as an example to show that from a regulatory perspective, and just staying away from the politics and all the issues of the US government controlling the internet, there are real issues that are going to impact the future growth of our economies if they're not addressed from the regulatory perspective. The second point is about security. Security is a real issue. If you go in the physical world, every country has, security institutions, the military, you have borders, you control your land, you control your airspace, you control the sea if you have. But in the cyberspace, there are no boundaries. Now, for some of you who might have the interest in the area of cybersecurity, you realize that over the last 6 years or so, there's been a stepping up of what some people have called militarization of the cyberspace. So you have countries establishing, cyber armies and cyber commands and cyber. So unless the policy and regulatory framework which this cyberspace is managed is fixed, and real policies are put in place, you can only foresee a future where there will be a lot of problems. So countries need to be able to have the means, and that's, I think Mike mentioned something about the security. They need to have the means to be able to have a better handle on the security side of the cyberspace. Very critical issue. In the interest of time, I think I'll hold it here. We'll have more discussions as the other panelists share. But to sum it all up, the future, all nations in the world cannot run off the internet. Our livelihoods, our economies, our businesses, government, everybody's riding on the internet. And so these are issues that have got to be fixed for the sake of a smooth and stable future, whether for the economy, for national security, and for other aspects for our nations. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Patrick. Mike, I'll give you a chance after the next speaker to expand on that one, because you've been around long enough. You've been involved in all those questions for a long time, so we'll need to hear from you in a while. But for the moment, may I ask you, Honorable Vincent Waiswa, to please give us your perspective from government. The message is clear. Governments need to be involved as part of the ecosystem. Special players in government, like regulators, need to be involved. But from your perspective, from government, directly from government, what do you see, and what should Africa be doing right now?
Thank you very much, Moderator. And thank you, colleagues, the panelists, for your contributions thus far. I would like to say, first and foremost, that I come in from a disadvantaged position in as far as internet governance is concerned. That is from the Ugandan perspective. In many places, it's rare to say that government is marginalized, but for the case of Uganda, in as far as internet governance is concerned, I can comfortably say we are marginalized, and I'll elaborate. As you will know, we've heard from Rwanda. They have the ICT Association that manages the CCTLD, the top-level domain name. But in Uganda, I have a private company that is running the CCTLD. And for me, that is an issue of great concern from the governance perspective. Reason being, we know for a fact that it's because of the growth in the internet that investments in the country have increased. Because I don't see any company that would want to invest in any country where they know that they do not have adequate technology, and more so internet capabilities, and come and put their money in such an economy. But over the years, we've seen growth in the banking industry in Uganda, and we all know that banks are highly dependent on the internet for their transactions, for the ATMs, for international money transfers, reconciliations, name it all. But I have a situation where government, say the Revenue Authority, runs its IT infrastructure on the .ug top-level domain name. You have banks with running on the same platform. But here I am as government without any say or control at the moment. And I think that is a very dangerous situation. Because if this company wound up, the public, the companies that have invested in the country, would raise questions and they'll be pointing at government. Having said that, we are having a process of making sure that there is a multi-stakeholder governance model that we can adopt to ensure that is managed. But the process is long. Now, I don't know whether it's long because of ICANN, long because of IANA, but those are questions I would like to ask probably in a private debate with the people who run ICANN and IANA. But I think it's extremely unfortunate that over the years, the government of Uganda has attempted to have discussions and we don't seem to be moving. Yet in actual sense, if anything, like I said, happened to the manager of the domain name in terms of if he wound up or anything happened to his infrastructure, government cannot offer a conclusive answer to the public. I think that's extremely unfortunate. So from the government perspective, I think it's critical that there is involvement. Now, you spoke about cybersecurity. These are very critical issues. But again, I cannot convince my citizens that I can provide them with security, cybersecurity, when I don't even know what happens at the level of the country called top level domain name. So as government, I think it's critical that that space is opened and the concerned international agencies ensure that the dispute resolution mechanisms come from 10 years to at least 1 year. Because countries can find a country struggling to get back the domain name in the proper ambit, and it takes a very long period of time. I think that is extremely unfortunate. On the other issue is around, well, I can say that it's not debatable the importance or relevance of the internet. If you look at UN indices and the GDP of various countries, you see that the countries that have higher adoption of the internet have indeed good GDP per capita for the citizens. Whether one influences the other or vice versa is an issue of debate, but that's not, the reality is, if you find a country that has good consumption of the internet, in most cases you find that the standard of living of the communities is also as good. And also, from the government perspective, we still have issues of access, and not just access in terms of infrastructure, but making sure the access is affordable and it's universal. So it doesn't make sense to have access in Kigali and yet deep in a rural area, there's no access. I think it's important that access is also equitable. It is spread to the vast areas of the countries where we operate and ensure that indeed it's affordable. Because if you look at mobile penetration, the decrease in cost ensure that at least there was access to communications or to a telephone to as many citizens on the African continent as possible. So it's evident that if we reduced the cost of access, made it more affordable, I think the lives of Africans would certainly change. So from that perspective, it's extremely important that governments take keen interest in the operations of the internet.
Thank you, Honorable MP. Look, I think at this stage, I may ask different members of the panel to also make a comment. Maybe we'll start with you, Mike, and then we'll come back to you, Pierre.
Thank you, Steve. One item that just escaped my mind, and let me bring it up, is the one advantage of using a CCTLD and having an attractive, vibrant CCTLD is that the money stays local. Yes, you could have a reseller who's at least keeping some of the money in country, but if you've got a vibrant CCTLD, the biggest advantage is money stays in country and you're not sending money offshore all the time. The other thing is you start building an industry around it, because once you're registering an RW domain, then hopefully you're hosting it over here, you're providing your email here, you need a data center, you need somewhere to locate your infrastructure. It improves and drives an improvement in infrastructure. So there are knock-on benefits. I think that the two gentlemen from the public sector side really honed in on the issues. The first is ICANN is a critical role player, but ICANN doesn't touch on a lot of the issues we're talking about. Content is not something that we do. Security is not something that we do. We can have a role, and we certainly need to be a good citizen in those spaces, but that's not part of our mandate. It's not what we were set up to do. It's not what we're capable of doing. So then the question is, where do you go to address some of those issues? Because many of them at the moment are not being addressed. And unfortunately, if they're not being addressed, it means that they're being left by the wayside. So that's something that we need to have a discussion about, as to where is the appropriate forum to have that discussion and interaction. The second thing that I picked up is that there are a lot of similarities with a lot of the other technology changes that we've seen, whether it's numbering resources in the mobile or fixed line space and internet naming and numbering. They're very related. However, the internet has a history of development which is based on private sector entrepreneurship and a collaborative development process rather than a strict top-down, regulated, controlled environment. Now, it could be possible that we could change that over time, but it also means that we may lose a lot of the innovation that the internet has brought us. And so what we need to do is we need to bring the free spirits to the table and say, governments have a legitimate concern over here. Stop ignoring them. listen to them and see how you can interact. And we need to bring governments to the table and say, we know this is not generally the way that it's done. Governments deal with other governments. They don't deal with private individuals and corporates from other countries. But in this environment, it's different. These are the people who own and have built the internet. And we need to find a way to interact with them, which allows us to develop some of these issues in collaboration. And it touches on what the minister was saying about control. Because I think many in the internet community hear the word control and they misinterpret it. And they interpret it to say, no, the Ugandan minister turned around and said that the government must control the internet. And then they argue that's not possible. But that's not what you are asking for. What you are asking for is actually a say and an audit function to ensure that a critical resource that is absolutely essential for the development of your country is not in the hands of people who are not accountable. And then it comes to issues of accountability and governance and making sure you know who's accountable and making sure you know who to call when something goes wrong, because your citizens are going to call you, they're not going to call that person.
Thank you. Pierre, are you able to make a comment?
Well, a quick one on what the honourable, member of parliament, just said from Uganda, with his redelegation issues. Today in Africa, we have close to 10 to 12 countries that are actually going through this. So Uganda are not the only one in that case. And situations are dragging for 5, 10, even 15 years for some of them. But I think the issue, and Mike actually rightly pointed out, most of the time, government or regulator just meet the, maybe whatever community is managing this thing and say, we want to control this resource. The moment they say we want to control this resource, those guys say, well, never. You are not going to control this thing. Because where were you when we started 10 years ago? In a few places, those guys, I'm not going to name them, but they went up to brand the name. They went up to, actually, they're saying, it is my property. It's not your property. This is an issue, actually. So you are right when you say, what is ICANN doing about this? Of course, there are ways in which you solve this issue. And definitely, when you have your domain name, say UG or whatever, you are not, this does not belong to you. It's a custody. You are custodian of it. You are keeping this, it's a resource that you are keeping for the whole community, global community. It's not just about your country. This is something we should also understand. Now, yes, government should have a say. And you also rightly pointed out that you are working on a multi-stakeholder model at some point. So people need to talk on country level. Once you talk and you bring this sort of consensus that ICANN needs, it's fast. I have countries in Africa today where it took them 2 years to do those things. And today they are regulating those things from their country in a kind of multi-stakeholder model, definitely. So yes, this is a great issue, but we are working on that. ICANN knows about those things. So we really need to talk more and more on that, and also make sure that people understand what it takes. It's not about ICANN. It's about in-country, the way problems are dealt with.
Before you put that away, this is a question for ICANN. Your CEO said ICANN is ready to help you, to work with you to make sure that this critical resource remains targeted at getting economic development. We all say we should talk to each other and work together and so on and so forth. In Africa, we haven't been doing enough of that with ICANN. So how should an African government or an African regulator or other players, social groups in Africa, how should they interface with ICANN and play their role in this ecosystem? Because we need to do it now.
Yeah. Thank you very much on that. It's a very good question. I was mentioning that ICANN is about kind of bottom-up approach. whatever policy is developed is discussed, from the constituency. We do have so many of those constituencies. So the first thing we should be doing is participate to these debates. What we are seeing today, and I have to say it, some of the African countries certainly woke up and say, well, what is happening here? We were supposed to do this. Why are you doing this? Because you were not there. So, but today, you do have so many areas where you can work. So what I will say is that let's participate. I was telling you, government, I've got the slot. The GAC, for instance. I would like to be seeing African government being represented, but aptly represented. So what I'm calling an informed participation. We do have a few Africans today on the GACs, for instance, but not many of them are really voicing out their concern properly. Sometimes they don't really understand the issues. But it's also about voting at some point on those things. So I think we really need to be informed and to make sure that we understand the issue. So get prepared before we participate. And second thing is about, engaging, actually. When you engage within your constituency, you can solve those issues. You talk about, area where those things are happening. You have, people that got the resources they can share. So you have to be involved. And Mike said it, for instance, on the ICANN board today. He's the only one representing Africa. But we are still looking for leadership, position there. So I think we need to come forward and understand the issue and be ready to also serve as a global, community, not just as national or local community.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Steve, if I
the
could
lone soldier.
Very quickly add to that. ICANN is, or has tried to evolve into a structure which allows multiple entities to be represented. The first is the Government Advisory Committee. It's a very important entity. There's an increasing amount of African representation, but unfortunately many of our colleagues from the continent attend but don't speak, and they don't let their African voices be heard. I also suspect, and I don't sit in too many of the GAC meetings, is that they don't coordinate particularly well with each other before the meeting. African business is really not well represented. And to any CEOs out there, I would encourage you, I know that the bottom line is important. My CEO has been very kind and very generous with my time, but it's important that you get people who are focused on achievable goals. And often those are business people in an environment like that because their input is really important. There's an opportunity for users and the user communities to be involved, and there's an opportunity for the country code managers to be involved. It's critical that Africa gets involved, but more than that, as was mentioned, running national and regional discussions so that we create a uniform approach, so that we're able to position a more unified approach and we don't surprise each other and argue against each other, to me is absolutely critical. Because at the moment, the Africans within the internet governance space get together at one of the few events that happen in person. Meetings are rushed. There's nothing conclusive that comes out of it. We don't do the preparation ahead of time to build or to bring ourselves up to a point that we can then look at achievable milestones and what we want to get out of our participation.
Well, a lot is being said about government, and I thought I would come in to say a thing or two. Pierre said, in most cases, people are less informed. That is true. Luckily, I'm not in that category. I'm fairly informed on internet governance issues. But having said that, I think we need to take that comment very, very seriously. Seriously in the sense that even if you look at the time when ICANN was getting its footprint in Africa, not many of us were present. We were not present. We had an opportunity in the processes of World Summit on Information Society. A lot of momentum was built, and then eventually everybody went back to what they were doing. But I think in such international processes, it's extremely important that as governments, we dedicate officers to fully participate. Otherwise, what happens, and I'll say this even at the expense of being reprimanded, from the Ugandan perspective, back in the days, you'd have two officers. They go to ITU meetings, they attend internet governance. You can't be a master of everything. And then you get the UK walking in with someone on cybersecurity, someone on internet governance, the other one is on infrastructure, the other one is on access and so on, and you're overwhelmed. And that's the point he's saying. They come in and they don't make their voice heard. We've not done research. We are not at speed as far as the issues are concerned, and we are overwhelmed. So in the process, you sit into a meeting like this one, and you have the teas and coffees and probably wine, and you get on the next flight and go back home. Bottom line, you have not achieved anything as a continent. So I think that's something that we need to humble ourselves, look into, and see how we address. I need to make a correction, or to be very, very emphatic and perhaps very clear. The manager of the top-level domain name in Uganda, I must say, is doing a good job. But we do not want to have a situation whereby the operation was good, but the patient died. So what if the operation was good and the patient died? So therefore, we must have that stakeholder approach in the sense that we are all accountable, because the internet is for everybody. You can't have one sole individual deciding, because if you look at the cost as well, you cannot, domain registration in Uganda is $50. In Kenya, I know it's $23. Rwanda, probably even less. Now, that alone would make people become unpatriotic and probably seek a .com or .something else because it is cheaper as opposed to the .ug. Why should I spend $50 yet I can spend $10? So I think that's the argument. So that's why we need, and when it comes to local content and branding the country, you find that you lose the point simply because the cost is up and high. Thank you.
Thank you to...
And our colleague from the regulator knows about price regulation. I don't know if the regulators believe they have a role to play in that space.
By all means, make a comment, then we'll open it up to the floor.
Well, I think that's, of course, regulators, we also look at tariffs and prices and so on. But I think at the moment, we need to fix the bigger issues and then get to those, because at the moment, if I look at the case of Rwanda, we do not regulate the price, and the CEO of Richter is here. He will tell you he doesn't consult me on the pricing. As a community, they are driven by trying to push the numbers as much as possible, so they put a price which I think is lower than Kenya and even Uganda. So the objective, it's a non-profit, they're not trying to make money. They're trying to drive the growth of the internet in the country and the usage of local domain names. Yeah. But in other spaces, sometimes we do, if the market is not helping consumers get reasonable pricing, usually the regulator steps in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists. Now, at this stage, we've got a few minutes before we break for coffee. I would encourage the audience to please ask questions, but also, please, give some ideas. You can hear we're right just at the beginning of a journey as a continent. So give comments as well as ask questions. So open to you. Just over here.
Yeah, my name is Professor Khan. I'm from Carnegie Mellon University, specializing in policy and regulation. I've got maybe a couple of comments to make. I think Patrick talked about the issue of the Google versus the telcos. And I think this debate took place back in the States. And I think one of the telcos challenged Google at a public conference in New York. And the Google CEO was there. And he said that Google globally, and I don't work for Google, by the way, globally pays millions of dollars to support all their various centers by paying the telcos lots of money for access. That's just a comment based on a conference I attended in New York when this happened, actually. I just wanted to pass that on to you. So Google does contribute to the telcos. The issues raised today are very similar, relate to the session taking place upstairs. And I think the issue of content, you know, I've been studying network neutrality, which has not arrived here. The net neutrality issue, which just took the big court case happened between Verizon and FCC, and the whole notion of Verizon being able to charge for content and affecting companies like Netflix, who now were previously being able to ride their content free on the internet, may have to be paying. The issue for Africa is very serious because most of our content is either hosted outside Africa, and most of the content is non-African content, which is riding on the internet. So if the telcos were to take the similar stance as Verizon did, the question to Patrick and panelists would be, what impact would that have on the consumer prices? Because it's the whole supply chain of internet providing and content provision will be affected, and the bottom line would be the net effect would be consumers would have to pay. So that's a question, I think, which I didn't hear today from the panelists answered. In terms of the participation issue, the question to the panelists is that what efforts are being made to get the civil society mobilized in understanding the issues, because I don't think the common man understands, the businesses, SMEs, content providers understand the issues of governance, the issues which was debated in Dubai, for example, the issues at WISs and so on and so forth. I've been in the telecom industry for 35 years, so I've lived through this whole issue. But I don't think we really truly understand what the issues are, and I think a question to the panelists would be, what mobilization can we do in terms of getting the civil society involved and an average person involved, and being able to get input from them as to what decisions and what policies need to be developed, planned, and implemented. I've got a lot more to say, but I won't take much time.
Thank you. If I heard you correctly, I think there are two parts to your question. One of them is the possible challenge we might have if we were to adopt a model where a content provider shares revenue with a connectivity provider. And the other one, at least what caught my attention, is how we can get full participation in right across society in making sure that we do what we need to do for this resource to do what we expect it to achieve. I don't know whether I got you right, but I was going to let a few questions in, but seeing that we've got two, let me see if the panel can please handle that.
Maybe, briefly about the issue concerning what efforts are being made to actually kind of, include civil society in the whole debate or policies, surrounding this. I think all these things start from, getting informed, getting the proper information. And I would say, for instance, on a country level, what we will be seeing is sort of groups that could take that opportunity. For instance, the users, protection organization, for instance, where are they? They have a role here. We do have ISOC chapters, for instance, in different countries. This is a role to them because they are keen to understanding those issues and elaborating on those so that civil society be involved. But I also think that it's a kind of, right to information, meaning you need to get the appropriate information. Some of the issues we are facing, for instance, when those questions are put to ICANN, for instance, is which language, in which language are you really talking in terms of, what are your official languages? And in Africa, for instance, we do have issue with, okay, Anglophone, Francophone, and then today Anglophone could understand, easily the thing because ICANN is basically, of course, using English. And so how do you turn this thing, around and work on sort of national, languages? So we need to work on also on those languages. So the way we pass the information, it's important. And then I'm talking about informed participation. People need to be informed. It has to happen on country level, definitely, and which is not happening really. The regulator in most places, they do regulate, yes. But we are saying that they do have a role to play to mobilize, the whole community around those issues, and then it boils down to everyone, playing its part, on it. So, I mean, that's briefly what I will share. I'll just leave the rest to my other panelists.
Okay, let me respond to Professor's question. I don't doubt that Google does business with some telcos. And so I'm sure they do pay money to some telcos, but I don't think they pay them for what I was describing earlier. And I sure know that none of the telecom operators here in Rwanda has received money from Google. So what I'm talking about is how the entire model works. The need to look at how the telcos and the content providers interact and the flow of the money and the benefits vis-a-vis the investment to make the entire global internet work. That's really what I was addressing. And my telco colleagues here might want to make a comment on that. But that's really what I was talking about. As to whether consumers would end up paying more, well, I think one or another, consumers will always pay to make the economics work, to make the services sustainable. The question is who do they pay, who gets the benefits, how does the whole internet economy and the whole ecosystem work to make sure that the benefits go where they should be and the ecosystem is working in a way that is going to be sustainable in the long haul. That will continue to see the right investments in building the infrastructures to sustain the demands of the future. A future where we're now talking about an internet of all things. So that's really what I'm addressing. Yeah. Thank you, moderator.
Patrick asked the question. We receive money from not just Google, but from a number of content providers. We operate the largest data center in East Africa. It's a carrier-neutral data center. And Africa, fortunately, has a tradition of content providers paying for hosting and paying for bandwidth. And to me, that's a healthy environment, because I agree with Patrick. You're going to have a situation where the consumer pays. What you want is you want openness, transparency, and honesty in terms of the pricing and in terms of the offering. Personally, I think that a number of the content providers in the United States got away with building a business model on other people's infrastructure and thinking that business model was sustainable going forward. Unfortunately, in the same way as if you're going to build a mobile operator, you could argue that you're a content provider in terms of voice value-added services. You spend millions building the infrastructure. Here the people just wanted the value-added services without paying for the infrastructure. Now, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't allow them access, but what I am suggesting is that access needs to be on a fair and equitable basis. And if you want to go as a regulator and start looking at long-term incremental costs or other mechanisms to decide what is fair and reasonable in the circumstances, or you leave it to the market. But to me, it's absolutely critical, because if the infrastructure providers are not getting a reasonable return on their investment, they're not going to continue investing in infrastructure, and they're certainly not going to invest in infrastructure to rural areas. They're going to stay just in the cherry-picked urban areas where they can make good money. So you need to give them a reasonable return without allowing them to gouge price and allow them to carry on and run that process. And there the regulator needs to monitor and make a determination whether the market is being efficient enough or whether the regulator needs to intervene. And it touches on the point that was raised, is knowledge, information, sharing of information, whether it's about net neutrality or internet governance issues, is absolutely critical. What I would say, though, is that most of this is not within ICANN's purview. And I think at ICANN we've been doing reasonably well trying to incubate through the at-large structures, through other structures. We've been trying to incubate and assist user communities to participate. They tend to gravitate towards ICANN because we have a reasonably good program. I'm not going to claim it's perfect, but a lot of the issues we're talking about here have nothing to do with ICANN. So we need to find other mechanisms that we can incubate participation. Or once those entities have been created, we need to spread their attention onto some of these absolutely critical issues because they're not going to get dealt with in an ICANN. And some people get very frustrated that they can't address these issues in ICANN. They say, I'm here, why can't we talk about it?
Well, thank you once again for the contributions. But Professor, if I heard you right, you made mention of content and perhaps the relationship between content and consumption of the internet. I think it's true. It's something that we didn't or we haven't really delved on as much as we should have. But I hold the view that it's extremely critical that we develop mechanisms of developing content that is relevant to our citizens so that we increase consumption of the internet. And that in many ways would assist in decreasing the cost of the internet. The same example I gave about the mobile phone. I mean, when the costs went down and more numbers subscribed, the cost of connectivity or telephone consumption, rather the numbers of telecom consumers went even higher. Now, in terms of content, it's critical. I'm sure in Rwanda here, we have, there's a very, very big opportunity for content aggregators in the sense that scientists, just like this gentleman from ICANN, they are not very good at communicating. My good friend here made comment and said giving appropriate information. But I hold the view that even today, he has not given us appropriate information. He's laboring to tell us how that is not what ICANN does. That is not what ICANN does. In other words, they have not communicated effectively. Implying there are things that actually ICANN does that they have not outlined. Every time I come to events like these ones, they shy away from talking about the DNS root system, which is what they do. They don't elaborate what they do, but they are very good at reminding us, that is not what we do, that is not what we do, but they're not telling us exactly what they do. And that's why they land in trouble with the issues of governance. It's extremely important that you check yourselves and start communicating effectively. They have root servers in 13 countries. Am I right? 13 root servers distributed across the globe. Am I right?
We operate one of those.
You operate one of those. Now that is the issue. So now the issues regarding governance arise from that. Who is controlling? Where is the control? It's spread across the world. The clones that you have, there are some in South Africa and some in Kenya. You come to an event like this one, very good opportunity, you misuse it. And then you blame us for lack of capacity. I think ICANN needs to go back and revisit their communication model to African countries. The other issue I wanted to touch, maybe in regard to content, is the infrastructure. We have a problem in certain African countries. You find Airtel digging fiber. MTN is putting fiber on the same route. I think that's your duty as a regulator. You need to put your foot down and say, share this infrastructure. It's as simple as that. If you can't share, we terminate your contract and you go away. The issue why resources are being misused in the private sector, it's their money anyway, but we have to create order. They will not go to the last mile simply because they're all looking for Kigali. Let them invest in the last mile and then make connectivity and internet consumption as affordable as possible. Thank you very much.
Certainly, there's nothing one can say after that comment. It's absolutely appropriate, but please.
Yeah, I just want to make two quick comments. One on net neutrality and civil society getting involved. As far as civil society being informed, we need an institution like RICTA within countries. We're talking about Africa, whereby they translate what they understand, what we are, what we are not, into a language which is understandable by students and by private sector. It's our, as far as Rwanda is concerned, it is our mandate as RICTA to translate that. As far as net neutrality is concerned, I see it as maybe a lack of governance. The regulator here has mentioned it. If there is no model to address the balance between revenues for content and the one who invested in the infrastructure, then we will see more of those models coming up, because they want they want a cut on the revenues. So they will tweak, they will slow. This is what net neutrality is about. They will slow some traffic so that those who want to push more traffic, they will pay. Definitely there will be those models whereby they will want a cut on those revenues. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now, MC, I think to be fair to the audience, we should at least allow them one or two questions before we stop. Is that okay? Please. Right at the back there. And if we can just do it quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I do want to comment on what Honorable Bajiri talked about, focusing on Kigali in terms of infrastructure development regarding the internet connection and all that. Maybe I'll just like to put a little clarity to inform him that when it comes to Rwanda, it has been so vigilant on that. If I tell you, like in the health sector, today we do have 540 health facilities, and before we go even to 440 health facilities, we do have at least 3 community health workers at a village level. And those community health workers are reporting like on a daily basis or on an incident basis. Like if there is a mother who has a bleeding or needs like an ambulance urgently, they use a mobile phone to report. And if those infrastructures, Rwanda has not reached every village of Rwanda, that remote mother would have died on the road and not be saved. So I would say that at least it has tried to reach everywhere. I do know that a lot of resources are required to do that, but at least those the 45 community health workers are reporting to the Ministry of Health at a central level, like daily. When they send the message, the alert, the ambulance gets an alert message, the health facility nearby gets an alert message, and then the central level, then an emergency goes to assist the mother or the child. And these 540 health facilities, we do have different e-health applications that we are using. They are reporting to those, and they couldn't be able to do that if those remote health facilities are not connected. So it's not just Kigali. I do, again, insist that resources are not yet enough. We are not having the 4G in those remote areas today. We have in Kigali, but we are in the right track. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could we have some more comments and questions? Maybe say 3 together, and then we can have one group of answers. Gentleman at the front and then one at the back.
Okay, my name is Mark Romba and I work for RDB Rwanda. My question is, and this has been going on for a long time, my question is, what's stopping African countries from controlling its traffic? Is it lack of effort from government or is it ICANN?
So are you talking about internet traffic?
Yes, internet traffic.
Okay, that's a good question. At the back, please. Right at the back, gentleman with his hand up.
Okay. The name is Akimbo Adebumi Adeola Cornerstone. I'm from Nigeria. Briefly, I work for CCTLD, that's .ng in Nigeria. And I also work with what we call the DNS magazine, DNS Africa magazine. Briefly, I want to go through certain points before I ask a question. The infrastructure and manpower when it comes to the issue of government in Africa is still very, very low. Still very, very low. And if I got the last question right, I'm not trying to answer it, but if we have our data base, our storage, our data storage, instead of taking all our information out of Africa to put in another country, if we start encouraging that in Africa, then the government needs to step up to it. So if the private sector is trying to tell you, for example, MTN in Rwanda can boast that they can keep all the data in Rwanda. Data generated by Rwandans in Rwanda. Some parts in Nigeria, we can also celebrate such things, but not all African countries can celebrate that, and government needs to function on that part. Affordable internet is important. It is key. When we say everyone should get smart, we should start thinking of the bandwidth. How much does the bandwidth cost? I think 5 gig goes for 7,000 rands. Am I correct? For some, okay. Probably I don't know how to call the rand, but it's very expensive. So government needs to step in. I've mentioned government twice. Now coming to ICANN. ICANN, the Internet Governance Forum, is basically to ensure that everybody becomes enlightened and participate as a stakeholder. Now, when it comes to enlightenment and participation, I'm not trying to defend ICANN. That's the Vice President ICANN for Africa seated on the high table. But the truth is, in 2009, when I attended my first ICANN meeting, I was almost lost. Almost 68 meetings in 5 days, I was almost lost. And there were issues concerning a particular domain name called .xxx. And I participated. But fortunately for me, I read. Now, the average African may not have the opportunity to read because not all African countries have settled the issue of power. Now, government comes to the fore again. Now, this brings me to what ICANN is. ICANN does what ICANN says it does. If you go to the ICANN website at the moment, you will see that the ICANN website has stepped away from its old format to a new format where the newcomer, quote that word, the newcomer, someone who doesn't know what ICANN does, comes in and gets to know everything he or she needs to know about ICANN. So ICANN is doing perfectly well. But when it comes to transparency and accountability, they need other people to come in and be able to support whatever they want to do or execute in places such as the African continent. And I beg to differ with my MP, sir, with all due respect, that ICANN is still far back. No, ICANN has taken the mantle of leadership to ensure that we are properly informed. It is now left for the African continent, and especially, quote and unquote, the government of each country to take the bull by the horn and ensure they support the growth and development of not just the infrastructure, but the manpower. Like I said before, if you go to their website, you will discover that any manpower in the government sector who wants to know what ICANN does can actually do that by going into that website. Now, final, I have a question for the MP.
Thank you.
You're doing so much for our country, for Africa, but when it comes to affordability, when it comes to a bill that states clearly, you know, you mentioned something concerning the .ug. .ug is more expensive than the organic domain extension. And the average African or Ugandan doesn't want to pick it up. What can African government not do by passing a bill and making it affordable or even free, that for every household gets your own CCTLD for free? Sir, are you with me, sir?
Yeah.
.ug. Get every household, just come get your name and whatever your country is. When Rwanda, come get your .rw for 1 year for free. Go to any of the registrars, get it down. After a year, if it doesn't come up again, we know we have done our part as a government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, I think I better let you answer that question very quickly.
All right, I'll try and be extremely brief. On the issue of the domain name, top-level domain name in Uganda, I'll act as a politician. I'll maintain what I said earlier, in the interest of time. Now, on the question that my sister, or the issues that she raised, I want to confess, I only used it as an example. I did not mean to say that Rwanda is not doing much, but I can bet I know more of what is happening in the ICT sector in Rwanda than my sister. Lastly, on controlling traffic, I think that's a very, very useful question. We need to up the game in as far as our internet exchange points are concerned, so that we maintain the traffic in the region. And the other aspect that is very, very important in terms of internet governance, access, and the entire conundrum of events is, which will be my last remark, is on universal access funds that we collect from telecom companies. We need to utilize those very, very well to ensure there is access, but also awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP. I think the intention had been that we'd have a concluding session, but I think in this question and answer segment, what we had intended to cover in conclusion has been covered. But I think the takeaway message here is that we as communities in Africa, we need to restructure ourselves into a participation value chain, if you like. ICANN does its role, but we need to organize ourselves in a way that behaves like a value chain all the way to what ICANN can do and what other organizations can do for us as well. Informed participation, well, at a personal level, I think ICANN does communicate significantly, so maybe we also need to look at ourselves and see how we receive that communication and what we do with it. And that partly has something to do with the way we organize the value chain to sustain that activity. Value chain, I mean, you know, in a country, if you've got a football team, it's good because underneath it, there are so many other football teams at different levels that do different things to feed that value chain. So for me, in conclusion, I think we've got a challenge, and that challenge we cannot ignore because we all need to develop. We agree that internet is going to do the job, help us to get that job done. So to conclude this session, could I please ask you to perhaps thank the panelists here. It's a tough topic because there is ICANN, but the subject matter is much wider than ICANN. But thank you very much for helping us structure it somehow. So at this point in time, I'll hand over to the MC and we can perhaps let other activities progress here as planned.
Thank you very much, moderator. A round of applause for the panelists. Unfortunately, it has to end now. So I'll request the panelists to leave the panel, as it were. As a reward for being a very nice crowd, I have bought you each a cup of coffee upstairs. So when you get there, just say, Martin said, I'm entitled to a cup of coffee, and you'll get it. And right after that, we'll be having another session that will be happening in the ballroom upstairs. So kindly make your way there. Have a cup of coffee. Don't forget the keyword, Martin said. And then we'll join the session later. Thank you very much.